Hey, everybody, it's your buddy, Pete A. Turner, executive producer and host of The Break It Down Show, the national correspondent for The Break It Down Show. Yesterday's show was Grant Martin. I hope you guys can appreciate that and how good it was. Today's show is old Pedro himself. That's right. Old Pedro's talking about, look, do we have the right to stay in Afghanistan, right? And I wrote a response. So Robert Gates. What am I going to say about this? Robert Gates wrote a op-ed in the New York Times that they published as we were getting ready to get serious about winding down the operation in Afghanistan. And he basically said, we've left too much stuff there. We've spent too much lives, too much money. We're too far along down the road. We just need some more money. We just need some more people. We just need some more NGOs. And then I flatly reject that. Should we stay in Afghanistan? That's possible, but we haven't earned the right to stay. And so Brad Hutchings sits down with me and we go through what it means to leave and why we have to leave and what did we not get right and not earn the right to stay. And that means we all own some human atrocity, and that's going to happen. It's going to continue to happen. The Taliban's going to continue to butcher people, and whatever they say, it's not true. We know too much. I know too many people on the ground, and you hear too much of it. It's terrible. But we didn't do the things you have to do to be able to stay. So that's what this one's about. I appreciate all you guys listening. We're going to spend the whole week listening to this stuff. So hopefully you're into it. If not, it'll be over soon enough. We'll get back to music and art and books and all those things that we'd like to talk about. But either way, I'll keep this one short. Here comes a guy, pretty smart, pretty cool, likes to do shots. You should take him out. You should go and click on his PayPal link at breakitdownshow.com. Support his show. He works real hard. Here comes Pete A. Turner, hosted by Brad Hutchings.
Lions Rock Productions.
This is Jay Moore.
This is Greg Cruz.
This is Bryce Vine.
This is Dexter from The Offspring.
This is Nathan
This
East.
is Sebastian Younger.
This is Daryl.
This is Stuart Copeland.
This is Mick Gillette.
This is Andy Summers.
This is Dr. Bob Greenberg.
This is Gabby Reese.
This is Rob Bell.
Hey, this is John Leon Guerrero.
Hey, and this is Pete A. Turner.
Hey, this is Pete A. Turner, and you're watching The Break It Down Show.
And now, The Break It Down Show with John Leon Guerrero and Pete A. Turner.
And this is Brad Hutchings. And today, I get to be the host, and Pete gets to be the guest because he never gets to be the guest. And I've never been the host. So we're going to mix it up that way.
All right.
We are here to talk today about an op-ed that Pete wrote that probably 5 of you read, but all of you should read. And there's a link to it on Facebook. And I want to talk to him about it. I thought it was just one of the most brilliant pieces of writing I have read in a long time about a subject matter I care deeply about, far and above Pete's subject matter. And I thought this would be a great opportunity. And Pete said, well, I can't interview myself, so you got to participate. So that's what I'm doing. How do I know Pete? Well, Pete and I met. Do you remember where we met, Pete?
Let me think about this. Well, through Jay Moore.
Yeah, obviously through Jay Moore. Okay, but where did we meet?
I'm going to remember as soon as you tell me, but I don't remember right now.
I know. We met at the Umami Burger outside of the Irvine Improv. Just met for a drink one night.
That's funny. Okay.
That is funny because all I knew about Pete was he was America's spy, but JJ kept telling me, dude, you got to meet Pete. Pete's cool. And I'm sure JJ told Pete, Pete, you got to meet Brad. Brad's not cool. So
yes, I do remember.
Yeah. And then we've been good friends since. We just really hit it off, and just been good friends since. Get a lot of coffee, talk a lot of ideas. Lately we've been playing guitar together. Pete actually dragged my fat ass out for a long run or a long walk the other day, which I'm still kind of recovering from. And we talk a lot. So I love the Break It Down show. I've loved it since, I started interacting with it. It's a great show, and, it's a real nice piece of work that Pete's done. And so I want to put the focus on Pete today. Let me set the stage here. We have been at war in Afghanistan for 20 years. I mean, like to put this in perspective, okay? Oceania was at war with East Asia. Oceania had always been at war with East Asia. I think Orwell put it best. Well, it seems like for a lot of Americans, in fact, for probably half of, a good quarter of America's population, America has always been at war with Afghanistan. It's a long time. President Trump, when he was still president, set an original deadline for leaving Afghanistan. and that was that his original deadline was extended to July of 2021, which so far the Biden administration has kept that as a deadline for getting out. We're getting out this month, allegedly. Robert Gates, he's a former Secretary of Defense under George W. Bush and Obama, wrote an op-ed in the New York Times, and he argued that we should not leave. In fact, what he said was, Pete quotes this at the beginning of his return op-ed, "We cannot completely abandon Afghanistan. It would be a disservice to our troops, to our Afghan partners, and, most important, it would not be in the U.S. national interest." Pete took great exception with this. And he wrote an op-ed. So the first thing, Pete dropped this on us a couple weeks ago that he'd written this op-ed, and he dropped it in Facebook, and he said, "I've written an op-ed." I think you said you're to the New York Times. You mentioned that.
Yep.
You didn't tell us what it was about. And you said, if anybody's interested in reading it, to hit you up to let you read it. And my first reaction to this was, who the hell's Pete to write an op-ed in the New York Times? I didn't, he didn't tell us what it was about. Had no idea. Excuse me. Who the hell's Pete to write an op-ed in the New York Times? And my second reaction was, Pete usually would send me this stuff. Do I really have to ask? And he didn't send it to me. So when he shared it with us on the 4th of July, I think that was when you shared it.
That's right.
And I read it, and I thought, holy crap, dude, that was an amazing takedown of the dumbest argument I've ever seen. It was a point by point, well articulated, very terse. Every word had a purpose. Talking with Pete later, I found out that there was stuff that he deleted. It was a fine piece of writing about what a waste of money this Afghanistan thing has been, how it's gone on for 20 years. Pete did not make the point that when we were originally sold this Afghanistan thing, it was to fight the terrorists over there, and nobody had a problem with that. Seemed like a great idea. Fight the terrorists over there. And then it turned into nation building and gender studies for the Afghani people and all sorts of ancillary garbage that is too expensive and basically unattainable. And Pete laid it all out in his op-ed. So my who the hell is Pete to write an op-ed? I mean, it was kind of like, who the hell would I be to teach people to play guitar or host bids for that matter, right, Pete?
You're doing a great job.
Who are you to write an op-ed? Let's start with that.
But it's a good question, and why the hell would the New York Times publish my op-ed? First off, they say they don't publish responses very often. I imagine if President Obama wrote a response, they would publish it, but that's because he's President Obama. So they didn't publish my op-ed, and in part because who the hell am I, right? And nobody else published it either. Now, that's not fair to every single publishing place that I sent it off to, but for the most part, it was taking too long. I wasn't getting the kind of responses that indicated that this thing was going to go anywhere, and I just wasn't going to sit on it anymore. So apparently I'm not anybody to write an op-ed other than someone that's done this work. It's like having a mechanic. Bob Gates is like, hey, we're going to build the world's greatest car. New car. It's going to be great. It's going to be red. It's going to have bucket seats and all these things. And he just kind of describes his vision of the future. And then I go on the line and I'm like, hey, these aren't working. I mean, that's who I am, right? Like, I'm a guy that went out and looked at what the results were supposed to be and like the nascent growth of fledgling government. And just off the jump, nation building is the wrong term academically anyhow, right? If the academics are going to drive this thing, state building is the more appropriate term. So who am I? I'm the guy that went on the ground and looked at what we were doing and helped to report back if it was working or not. And
let's stop there a second.
Yeah.
So it's funny you bring up, what if I'm some auto executive and I come up with this great, idea, this car I'm going to build.
Right.
And they don't ask the people on the line. Well, this is funny because this was the career path of one Robert McNamara, who was at Ford Motor Company, a Ford Motor Company exec before he became Secretary of Defense under, let's see, would that be, under Kennedy and Johnson.
Right.
Dragged us into Vietnam and basically set the example of somebody however many thousand miles away. How many thousand miles away is that, Pete? It's like what? It's like 10?
from
10,000 miles away?
C to Kabul. Yeah, call it 10,000.
Sure. I was thinking DC to Saigon, but same difference. Call it 10,000 miles, right? Someone 10,000 miles away with, all his textbooks and all his planning and all his smart people, deciding how things should be, directing everything right down to, the last movement of everything, and basically failing at it because did not have a connection with information on the ground.
Right.
Pete in Afghanistan and in Iraq was a spy. And that doesn't necessarily mean he's, walking around in a black hat, like hiding behind poles and everything else. Pete, tell us what you did as a spy.
Yeah. So one of the things I learned early on in my career was that my job is to give the commander the things that they don't have so that they can accomplish their mission. That's what a spy does. And for the most part, most modern commanders have a 4-line mission statement. They all say it's unique and everything, but here's the basic mission statement of everybody. It's close with and destroy the enemy. That's objective number 1. 2, protect the force. 3, enable the enablers that are leaving the camp. Like the people like me, people who do agricultural things, people who do the projects and non-lethal efforts. And then the 4th one is to teach and train, enable the local forces, partner with the local forces and get out and go do that. So those are the 4 things. And for the most part, I never focused on close with and destroy because the entire unit is focused on that. So if I got something about that, great. But what about the other 3 line items that we're working on? Like, hey, if your partnership effort is not working, commander, would you want to know about that? Would you want to know if you've got toxic relationships? Would you want to know if you've got incapable people? Those are the things that I focused on because nobody else focused on them. And so it was all this fertile ground to help a commander go, wow, I can really lead this. I can fix this part of my effort. And so when I did the bulk of my work, it was focused on those things, so much so that if someone gave me something threat related, I would give it to the threat focused folks. So I would never undermine their mission and I would never compromise my position with the locals as I built trust. So I'm building trust. I'm getting information for the commander that he can't have, oftentimes getting it from the locals themselves, not unbeknownst to them, but something that they wouldn't necessarily want to reveal to me. And that's the kind of spying that I do. It's highly effective and it's powerful for a commander. And so when I'm out there and talking in the villages and looking for answers to those 3 other efforts, how do we protect the forest? How do we do our mission better in terms of teaching and training? How do we get those enablers out to be successful? There's a lot of fertile ground there for me to cover and bring information back. And that's how I learned everything I learned, was by focusing on these aspects.
So, this isn't just about Robert Gates either. How many other secretaries? We had Gates, Hillary Clinton, John Kerry, Mattis.
Yeah.
They all failed too.
Yeah, secretaries of state, secretaries of defense. How many commanding generals said we've turned the corner in Afghanistan? And I literally counted at one time, and I stopped counting at 6 corners, because
a lot of corners.
To even say those words, right? Like if you're a general and you're like, I cannot say the words, we've turned the corner. Secretary Mattis said it. All kinds of generals said this thing, right? And you didn't turn the corner, or you turned it so often you were going in circles. And that's sort of the greater point of that. And so when I look at that, is it unfair for me to say that these folks failed? No, because they were the ones that had the authority, they had the budget, they had all the discretion, they had all the advice from all the think tanks. And what they didn't have was the ground truth. And so they would continue to believe that they were able to do this thing. To this day, apparently, Robert Gates thinks they can get this right. I'm not saying that we couldn't do it. I'm saying that we didn't do it. And because
what was the ultimate mission? I mean, what we were sold on is fight the terrorists over there, right? And so, early on, that's exactly what we did. Arguably, maybe we did that all these 20 years, but there was so much more to what the mission became.
I can be with a battalion that's focused on, it's an infantry battalion focused on closing with and destroying the enemy, and watch them not kill a single Taliban for months at a time because the Taliban won't engage. That's not how they fight the fight. And why would they? Why would they mass so that an American unit could go kill them? So they pick their fights. They as soon as we go home, they come out. They work the night. We work the day. And they're much better at it because they can stay and they can hide in plain sight. So we got our asses handed to us for 20 years as well. So sure, did we kill some bad guys? Absolutely. Absolutely. But if you only focused on the military aspect in these state building kind of fights, You are ignoring the social, the cultural, the political, the religious, all the economic, all of these other aspects of the fight, the affect over the effect. If you can't create the affect you want, you cannot win. And so what folks like Secretary Gates, and we'll use him because he's the one that was opening his big mouth, when he says, oh, we just got to spend more money, spend more time. No, we don't. We don't have the capacity to do this. And when I'm saying this is not that we don't have great Americans focused on this and pouring their heart and soul and their careers into this. It's we don't bother to learn how to do this well. And we haven't. We've had time to learn how to do it well, right? And I think one of the things, most powerful notes in this whole piece is towards the end, in the conclusion, and this is 100% true. We've all spent more time learning how to put sunscreen on our bodies than we ever learned how to even use an interpreter. And you think about that, like here's a place where you need an interpreter. And it's complicated language-wise, not because Dari or Pashto are hard, but because what do they speak there and what does that mean to them? What is their local language? The official government language of Afghanistan is Dari, but go speak that in Pashtunistan and that part of the country, and you won't be relevant, right? And so we haven't even learned how to use an interpreter as an institution. Do we go out and do it anyhow? Yes, but you don't fire your weapon because you just know how to do it. You learn as an institution how to do it. You learn your tactics and techniques, like how to drive a tank. We measure that all the time. Can you drive this tank? Can you put it in the right spot in combat? Can you hit your targets? Great. You're validated to deploy to go talk to people now. And if we don't see a problem with that, I do. It doesn't work. And so you can't prep for something that's going to be combat focused if the primary mission, and Brad, you've heard me ask this question on the Break It Down show all the time, of SEALs especially. Have you fired more bullets or had more conversations in conflict zones? And one exception, there's one person that said the other way. All the rest laughed and said way more conversations than rounds.
Yeah. So on your point about learning to use interpreters, I mean, it goes beyond just, learning to use them in the field. We have a big debate going on about whether these Afghani interpreters are going to be, admitted to the United States and can apply for citizenship. Yeah. Can migrate here because they're basically dead men walking in Afghanistan. When we leave, these are the first people they're going to round up, the people who collaborated with the Americans.
Yes. Yeah. They're going to call them. They're going to kill them.
We even have a very specific case of an Afghani interpreter who is here, who may be deported, is being denied citizenship and may be deported for having, quote, collaborated with the Taliban when he was 9 years old by bringing him a slice of bread at the instruction of his mom. He was perfectly truthful in his citizenship interview, and now it looks like he's going to be deported. How messed up is that?
It's really messed up. Let me talk about this for a few minutes. And this is squarely on the Biden administration here. If you're going to have a very permissive policy on the southern border, why on earth would you penalize people to the point of death for working with us? If you live in the Taliban regions, which is a lot of Afghanistan, some areas not, but in a lot of them, you are aligned with the Taliban. You have to be, because if you don't, you die. So to put that on a kid, to put that on a man, look, they don't want, it's just like if you were in, we always love to use Nazis as a bad guy. If you're in Nazi Germany and you're trying to survive because your country's at war, and right now it's the Nazis, then you just let these think that you're on their side, and the moment you get a better deal, you change your allegiance. This is not a shock to hear this. Yeah. So of course we always did this. Look, we put people in a box, a Taliban box, right? We would assess them as being aligned with the Taliban, and we would put it on this little report card that we could all read. I'm going to read about Brad Hutchings. Oh, he's aligned with the Taliban. That will never, ever, ever change. No one will have the guts to go, I've met Brad, I've talked with him out in for hours. Nothing I've ever said has been about the Taliban with him. He, to my knowledge, has nothing going on with them at all anymore.
Well, wait, except there is the T-shirt I'm going to make, which is going to say, I've been aligned with the Taliban. Just because you gave me a great T-shirt idea there, Pete.
But this is the idea of, like, you're never allowed to not be aligned with the Taliban. I met a counterintelligence team. This is what I was, counterintelligence agent. And I was there in part to support their mission. This is in Afghanistan, a very dangerous part of Afghanistan. And these guys were going around camp, putting people through like a lie detector type test and assessing them. Right. In one interview, by the way, it's harder to get a job at IBM than it is to get, on an American camp. One interview. Yeah. And these guys were, this is in a counterinsurgency environment where you're trying to win hearts and minds. You're trying to reduce the level of violence. And these guys were recommending everybody that they talked to from Afghanistan for termination because they were aligned with the Taliban. And I'm like, what are you guys doing? And by the way, I got fired for this. I got kicked out of country. But I talked to these guys at length, and I'm like, this is a counterinsurgency environment. Why are you terminating anybody while they're aligned with the Taliban? So what? You guys are counterintelligence people. If
Right. This is not HR. This is not HR telling them to take their things and leave. This is that's termination in the field.
Well, yeah. And think about this. These are counterintelligence agents. Their job is to build double agents among many jobs, right? This is their job, is to dream. I made a double agent. Okay, great. So someone is truly aligned with the Taliban, truly one of their sources. You are a counterintelligence agent. You should be going, oh my God, we've got the ability to go out and bird dog all of these guys that are aligned with the Taliban and start turning them into sources. OMG. I mean, that's what your job is. And I was saying this to these guys. And instead of them being inspired and saying, yeah, you know what, you're right. I'd rather have these guys on this camp. I'd rather be able to maybe turn some of these guys into sources. They said things like, they're going to report where the fuel farm is. Motherfucker, the fuel farm, everybody knows we're on halfway up a mountain. Just walk up the mountain 10 more feet above our camp. You know how big a fuel blivet is? A fuel blivet is a giant bag of fuel. It is, there's a lot of different sizes. It is no smaller than 10 yards by 10 yards, and it's often significantly bigger than that. It's a giant pillow of fuel in a sack. Is it a target? Yes. Here's how you find it. If you're below the camp, wherever the helicopters land all the time, and
probably
stay
right
for
there.
10 minutes, they're right there getting fuel. So I said that. I'm like, what are you kidding me? We've been here for how long? This is in 2011. We've been here how long? And you think they don't know where that stuff is? Can you look up and see the mountain? They can look for that stuff whenever they want. If they want to hit that and they have the capability, it's already too late. You want these guys on this camp so that you can work them. By the way, if they're not going to interpret, who is? How can you keep firing everybody, right? So here we are. We got these knuckleheads running around the countryside, firing people. So now they have no money, no job. We lose the ability to speak the language as well as we could before. And they haven't turned any of them into sources. And this is what these guys are built to do. So when I get fired up about this stuff, it does drive me crazy because it is so wrong. They're so ill prepared to do this mission. Again, God bless them. They're hard working. They're volunteers, to come into the force and all these things. They're professional, but they're wrong. They're bad at their job because they look at it from a point of view of threat, never of opportunity to get this right. We've got an incredibly hard mission here. We're going to stabilize a country that's been most countries are unstable anyhow. We're going to try to stabilize a place where our presence adds to the instability, and we're not going to be able to speak the language well. We're not going to be able to communicate religion well. We're not going to be able to on. And you're going to make it harder by firing people and giving them less of a reason to live and partner with us. Yeah. You are dumb. Don't do that. And so when
Bob, you really did mean fire people, not like terminate them, like boom.
Well, they will get terminated. I mean, look, if they stay around long enough in Taliban,
I got you. Okay.
The Taliban will look. We terminated them from possibly having a job or having a job, right?
Right.
When they go back, that still may get them killed by the Taliban. It's like the mob. You show up, you live on the camp for 5 days, you come back. It's like, nah, we don't trust you anymore, and they kill that guy. Maybe. I don't know because you don't get to follow up on that. But I promise you, by firing people, those guys for sure got someone killed just for the inability to stay on the camp where it's safe and take care of their family. So now you've got a family that either has no male figure, which is super important and horrible for those people in Afghanistan in terms of survival, or you've got someone off the camp that survives and has to find a way to make money. And it doesn't. So it's these kind of things that Robert Gates has no idea about, right? He doesn't know how incapable we were. I got to see unit after unit. They would rotate. I would stay, and the units would rotate over the top of me. They would come in, and they're like, "We're going to win the war," and then they would do the same actions over and over again. When I was in Iraq, everybody said, "Oh, Afghanistan's totally different." Yeah, maybe, but our game plan wasn't. It was the same stupid playbook, right? And so I knew so much about Afghanistan before I ever got there because I knew us. I knew what our inability was and the mistakes that we made, so I could start running. If it's a race, right, the army's like trying to get out of bed, I'm already doing laps around the track, already knowing people, already meeting people that I'll never meet, because I knew us better than we did. We thought we always had the answer. We never had the answer. We had to go earn the answer. And so I would show units how to earn the answers.
Let's back up to one little point that you made in your last little soliloquy rant. 2011, you were in Afghanistan. You were in theater still in 2012.
Yeah.
That's 9 years ago. That's not really, I mean, it seems like forever, but honestly, that's not a long time. We're not that far removed from this. We're still making the same mistakes. You know, we didn't learn anything. And yet that's just 9 years. I was just becoming an old man at that point, Pete.
Right.
41, 42 years old, and you're still in theater. You're, a year older than I am. You're becoming an old man at that point.
Yeah.
That's crazy to me. We're not that far removed. We've known each other, what, 4 or 5 years?
Yeah, at least.
Yeah, so that's like half the time, longer than that, dude. I'm going to say 6 or 7. 7 years probably. Yeah.
Yeah, like that. Yeah.
That's about right. You were not far removed from that, when I met you.
Yeah.
That's
true.
That's crazy to me. And we still have the same problems. We were not learning anything. You have a great list of ground truth. I mean, of course, you identify the problem with distance, and you have a great list of ground truths in your op-ed. Agriculture.
Mm-hmm.
Robert Gates wants to improve agriculture commerce. So, what did you guys do? Let's see here. Oh, pomegranate farmers, market chains. You have a beautiful picture in this as well as to what the little market chain shed looked like. I mean, somebody thinks that's an amazing thing to build. I mean, there's like lots of people who'd like to build that in their backyard and put a barbecue pit under it.
Well, yeah, I mean, that was one of the jokes. So, and a lot of this work I did with Rich for the Day, right? And one of the things I knew early on was that we suck at ag. I learned that in Iraq. Like, we had these absolutely preposterous situations in our head that if we brought people who are farmers certain things, that they would have to hire day laborers to come in and help them bring in the crop. So I would go out and ask these farmers, like, how much of a yield would you have to have with whatever it is that they raised to have to hire external people? And they would laugh in my face. It was one of my favorite things to have happen, is have them laugh in my face and go, I would never, ever, 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 ever hire anybody outside of my family. There is no crop so big I can't bring it in. It does not exist. So here is this whole thing the State Department and the Ag Department are doing. They're like, oh, we're gonna make these yields so large, they'll have to hire all these whatever Iranian day laborers or village people from outlying areas. And it was never going to be the case. Or if it was so far off into the future, it was impossible for the farmer to see. Right. But we would brief it all the time, like, oh, they're going to have so much yield. And then I would go out and I would see these efforts, greenhouses, drip irrigation. And you would imagine someone that's got, let's say, 10 football fields of active farmland in this one area, right? Who knows how much more, but let's just say a 10 football field area. And they've got drip irrigation from us. And it's an adorable little 40 acre, not even that, 40 yard square foot, 40 square foot square with one tank above it, right? The entire rest of the land is laying fallow as they go, okay, here's your drip irrigation. I'll perform the thing. I'll show you. And you go to the next field over and it's lush and it's full and it's done by them. So how are we increasing yield? You go into these greenhouses. So I have a whole thing on greenhouses. But I looked into this in Iraq and I would ask the locals. And this one farmer broke it down for me. He's like, look, on the ground, I put a ground crop, right? Above that, I put a fruit tree crop, apples or whatever it is. Above that, I have dates. And I've built this canopy of moisture. It's not a lot, but in the desert, I don't need a lot. And that's how that's how I do my greenhouse, is by doing that. And that blew the Americans away when I reported that back. They're like, what are you talking about? That's not what he does. And I'm like, man, you know what? He thinks he does it. Doesn't matter if it's real or not. He thinks it does it, And so we're like, we're going to give people greenhouses. The mayor of this county that I was in said, hey, could you guys stop giving those things out? Because people line outside of my door complaining about it. Either they want one, they're complaining about someone having one, or someone, he wants another one. And I spend my entire day dealing with all of these people. You're causing my ability to be a governor to go down. And it was true. So I wrote about these. I called them, l'orangeries. People have these orangeries. And the thing is they don't yield a bigger crop. And so I was talking to, this is a gig on my buddy Peter Van Buren, because he got mad at me when we were in theater together. And if you know Peter's work, you'll understand. And Peter's a friend, so I can say this. He was talking about these greenhouses. This is before like his light went all the way on. And to his credit, my light was not all the way on yet either. And I said, well, I'll go out and look into this. And so I was looking around trying to learn about greenhouses. And then as I'm taking off to leave, I take this incredible picture of all the farmland below me, and it's covered in plastic because they already know how to do greenhouse things. They just do it by covering their crops in plastic. And it was miles and miles and miles and miles of not our greenhouses. The rest of it caused social breakdown and instability because we would inject this capability that wasn't even relevant into this space. So when I say these things about ag teams, I know it's kind of a long thing, but it's a big answer, right? So when I say these things, it's coming from a lot of knowledge of watching us get this wrong. So I start with the premise of we're already getting this wrong. What do we actually know? And so I ask a major. This is a person with over 10 years in the military, and this guy is a farmer, right? And I say, so what is the market chain? And he's like, I don't know. And I'm like, well, I actually said, why are you fucking with it? And he's like, because that's my orders. My orders to come in here and do that, mess with it. And I'm like, okay, but they have a market chain already. You should understand what it is before you go to change it. And so the pomegranate farmers did have wholesalers. And so let's go to these collection centers. The collection center was there so that a farmer or a group of farmers could bring their crops into this place, and the wholesaler would somehow know that this was the place to go. There's not a sign on the goddamn thing or anything. And they would just sit there all day until some wholesaler showed up. Even though they
honestly, Pete, the picture you posted, if you hung some tarps on the front and you installed a few urinals, it would make a good outdoor bathroom. I mean, it was like what?
One of the things we collected was, what is this going to be? And one guy's like, I'm going to turn it into a shop. Another guy said, it's going to be a bus stop for our buses in town.
Yeah, it's not going to be a Big Lots, that's for sure.
And think about this. Now, when you brief this thing, right, the ag team's like, we're going to build these 18 collection centers throughout the province. There's going to be one here. And they show the site without one there, like show a picture of dirt. There's going to be right here. And then there'll be one here. And this is really going to improve the other. No, it's not. No, it's not. Matter of fact, you didn't ask anybody to do this. You didn't ask anybody's permission. You're just going to dump a bunch of cinder block on the ground. So whenever I found out where one was going to be, Rich and I would try to get to that spot because I was dying to ask the governor, hey, governor, what's that? And then the governor back, I haven't got the first fucking clue. I don't know what that is. I have no idea why that stuff is there. No one's asked me about it. I'm like, would it make you mad if they'd picked a piece of land and they were just of course it makes me mad, you know? And I would ask all these, they're leading questions, but I'm telling this story because we would never even ask permission. We would put this thing there. And I guarantee you that having been in Iraq in Afghanistan almost 10 years, not a single one of those things is being used to display crops because they already had a system for that. And it was frankly a better system than some stupid shack. You know, who wants to sit in a metal roofed shed in a place where it's 115 degrees in October? Right. You know, come on. That's dumb. By the way, the wholesalers come and they either buy the entire crop. They go, I see how much we've done business for 25 years, right? I'm going to come and buy the whole crop, or I'm going to come and buy these 15 trees. Or can you bring me? And here's the other thing. They always wanted to set up co-ops. Can you bring me however many tons of pomegranates to the market and we'll do the deal there. And so what the farmers would do is they would get together, they would co-op, and they would rent a big truck for all the people that wanted pomegranates delivered to a certain spot. They would bring in the crop themselves, maybe put it in their own minivan and drive it. I've seen picture a minivan, Brad, with 2,000 pomegranates in it. And I mean up to the top. Like the dude is driving in like a little cocoon of pomegranates all the way through the entire
And it doesn't have the minivan doesn't have a max fill line or anything.
No,
right? No, not at all.
It has this is 100% true. It has goats ratchet strapped to the top, living goats going. Ah! That is what farmers do in Afghanistan. And to understand that, you have no business changing it, right? And so when Robert Gates says we can do a better job, well, you didn't with agriculture, and it's real simple with those guys. It's real simple.
Let's talk about an example you put in your editorial here, and this was grape growing.
Yeah.
And what did we do here? We encourage grape growers to use trellises to increase yield because, every American knows grapes got to grow on a trellis for sure. What was the reaction of the farmers? Why didn't they like that?
Well, there's a couple of reasons. One, it wasn't the way they did it, right? And the way they did it turned out yielded grapes. We think that it yields more on a trellis, and maybe even the farmers agree, maybe they don't. But the real problem is that once you do that, it ties you to the Americans. And in a place where there's not enough security and stability, that means that the Taliban can come and lean on you, kill you, abduct you, kidnap you. It draws attention to you that you are partnered with the Americans. And that is not something that farmers want to have tied to them. So one of the things I had to do for one of the commanders, like, help me figure out why they won't take our help. And
Mm-hmm.
this was one of the answers because it attaches them to the Taliban. So we have
Because
money,
you're helping.
right? We have micro loan programs, and if these guys accepted that without Taliban buy-in, because the Taliban really ran the area, then you would expose yourself to harm. Or they would take that money that we gave them to start a laundromat or whatever crazy thing that we were paying for, and that money would go right back to the Taliban to help fund our own local insurgency. We would fund our own enemy, a lot of times. So this trellis thing it's ridiculous. And as soon as you understand that, yes, of course, these guys don't feel safe, why in the world would they change that if the Taliban comes knocking once they put up a bunch of trellises? Doesn't matter how good the yield is. That's not worth it. If it's 10% bigger, is that in any way worth having the wolf knock at your door all the time?
If it's 100% bigger, probably not.
Right.
Yeah. You mentioned something about you and Peter, last name, help me out.
Van Buren?
Yeah. That you both in theater realized you probably started out all bright-eyed and bushy-tailed and on the program and everything else. And then sometime in theater, you start to realize, hey, wait, there's something wrong with the orders. There's something wrong with what we're being told to do. The mission is bullshit, blah, 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 blah. Walk me through that.
So part of the thing, and this is in Iraq, was we would have these, because I had very good access. I was great at what I did. And I say this often because you have to understand, I'm not the average person. I stayed, I learned from my mistakes. I watched us make mistakes. So I got faster, better, stronger, quicker than anybody else around me. So I was I was running while they were stretching, trying to get out of bed. I'm a professional. It's like a Major League Baseball player trying to explain to a softball player the difference in what they do. Okay, so when you get there and you realize everything's already messed up and you have freedom of access like I did, you go out and you see the failed projects from 2 and 3 units before, 4 units before, and you see what should be an old police station, and the building is either used for something else, or the building was built so poorly that it's already falling apart just a couple of years. Right. And so it's not being used for its intended purpose. So why isn't there a police station here? Why is this school empty? Why is this school not only empty, but why is it falling down? And where are the kids going to school? And so that would lead to my ability to go, wait a second, there is no legacy here. There is no unit that can come back and would recognize their success. The units don't know that when they leave. They leave and they hold precious their time there. And they think, oh, we've accomplished something. We have a legacy. But I promise you, you don't. The moment you leave, your legacy shrinks away to nothing. Right.
Is that because they have 6-month or 9-month projects or whatever, and then they're shipped out and the next crew comes in?
Yeah, in part, yeah. The repetition of the tours stacks up, right? And then sometimes you're handing a project off to the next unit. There was this thing I called the windmills of the Medine, right? And there were these vertical windmills designed to pump water into the farming area, right? And I was there long enough to understand that this was a multi-commander problem, right? I was able to talk to these commanders, and the last commander I got him to give it up because they won't do it easily. I'm like, you have to give this up. This is a waste of your time. Why is it a waste of my time? Well, you're the third commander in a row stuck at the same point. The guy who went crawfish on the deal in Scotland, he ain't coming back. Also, by the way, and I had to keep gathering information because it was never enough. Just because it was hard to do, these commanders would dig their heels in and they would, I'm going to get these things built, God damn it, right? Because that led to victory, and it was like about ego and commanding. Like, hey, by the way, I talked to the guy whose house is right there where the windmills are. And I said, what about these windmills? And he's like, I don't know. Don't care. Like, well, how do you guys get water inland? Keep in mind, I've already talked to all the farmers down the line where the water would go. And he's like, I've got a Chevy 350 water pump motor, and I pump it on. I turn it on these days. And if someone needs more water, they come, they give me a little money. I give them a little more water. I'm like, is that legitimate? Should you be doing that? And he's like, look, nobody's got enough money. Those guys want a crop. They'll give me money. And that's what I'm the guy with the motor. I'm the guy with the access. I pump water. I do what I'm supposed to do. And if they want more, they pay me for it. Sounds pretty fair to me. So you take that.
Kind of how service works.
Right. You take that back to the commander. And I'm like, by the way, the yield for these pumps is X. The yield for the Chevy 350 motor pump, it's like X plus a sideways 8, like more.
Right. Massive. Right. Plus you can buy replacement parts on, out of a catalog.
You don't need some Scottish guy to come down and deal with this problem for you. Right. And so these are the things, Brad, that we would have these multi-tour problems as well as these short-term things. So we would come out 100% true, this story, right? We had a guy contracted to build a park in Iraq. We took pictures of the area ahead of time. We're going to show him. We're going to make sure he builds a park. And I don't know what the hell a park is in Iraq, but I know what it is in the States. Swing set, slide, maybe some bark on the ground. And the guy comes back, asks for his money. We pay him his money. And then we go out and take a picture of the park, and it is literally exactly the same, if not had more trash in it. Like he basically did nothing, and we paid him for it.
I mean, did it have goals for a soccer pitch though? No, not even that. That's cheating. That's cheating. Yeah. Or was this Afghanistan or Iraq?
This was in Iraq, but I'm sure the same thing happened in Afghanistan because
Afghanistan it would be Buskaki. That's where they.
Maybe. Yeah. I never saw anybody play that, and actually. I would ask them what games they played, just out of curiosity.
They're not into that.
And I mean, look, in certain parts of Afghanistan, maybe, right? I didn't see horses that you could even ride where I was, there's not that much flat ground.
Just to lay it all out. I mean, allegedly, according to this movie, this documentary, the Buskaki Boys or whatever it was called, that some of us were just very obsessed with a decade ago. They'd ride around their horses and basically play polo with a goat's head.
Yeah. And then here's the thing that is so pervasive. People lock onto that so much that I was asking these guys, like, what kind of games they played. They're like, oh, there's this game we play with horses. And I'm like, is it this game? And they go, no, we don't play that around here. And I'm like, I don't know, man. And they would describe to me the game, and I couldn't understand it. And they couldn't show me because it wasn't something they were ready to do right? But I would bring this back and they'd say, oh, you mean Buskaki or whatever that thing is called. And I would say, no, I specifically don't mean that. And that's why I wrote that in the report. They're like, no, you mean that game. That's the game we're talking about. And I'm like, absolutely not. This game had nothing to do with that game. This wasn't polo with a goat's head and sticks. And I had to convince the Army that these guys didn't do that. And I'm going to tell you another story about sports in the valleys that I was in. So I'm out asking, what do you guys do? Like, what do the boys do? I mean, these guys need something to do. Like, yeah, you're right. We do wrestling. And I said, wrestling. Okay, I'll bite. Now, keep in mind, this is all through an interpreter. So the interpreter is doing their best. And they said, okay, well, we're in a town called Divkhana. Okay. And this is how legit this is. And they say, oh, we got the kid who's like the local champion. And I'm like, oh, this is awesome. Can you guys do a demonstration? Like, we'd love to. I mean, look, we're asking them about their stuff. And so they bring out these two young guys, and it's kind of like sumo, except for they're grabbing each other's belts, sort of, right? And they're trying to shove the other person out of the area. And so they're just kind of using like a hug and a shove, and it's a wrestling that we would all recognize and have a specific name for it, but this was nothing more than that, just two dudes and some dirt in a circle, right? And I brought this back to the Army, and they're like, oh, we can do something with this. We'll start an academy for wrestlers, and and I would get excited about these things too. And I'm like, yeah. And I'm like, but by the way, let's not do any of that, because they didn't ask us to do that. They just had a couple of kids to show, and so I titled the report The Crippler of Divkhana, and I wanted them to see how everybody got so excited, and they can't be there. And it's funny to call a little kid the crippler, but that was the thing, was like they had their own thing for it. We didn't need to do anything with it. If anything, we can say we'd love to learn more about it. We'd love to maybe write a story about it. We'd love to see more of it. We want to see more normal things. That's the only thing we would need to do, and just say within the governor, like, how do we make this? But we never do that. We always take these things and try to use it to our advantage. We did the same thing with religion. I mean, everything. Like, how do we turn this into, how do we weaponize religion? And it's embarrassing. Right. So when Bill Gates says,
or even worse, how do we turn religion into an iPhone? How do we sell, how do I sell a billion units of it? And it just doesn't need a billion units.
Who's giving negative sermons?
Right.
If that's the only thing you're focused on, how about every major tribal decision has a religious elder there who's signing off and legitimizing that decision? And if you don't see that person in your American created meeting, then you don't have a legitimate decision. Even if you see that person there because you take Pete's advice and you go get a religious leader, it does not mean that you've got an actual decision. You might have a performance of a decision. And so until you can verify that that decision has actually happened and these guys are on board, then you won't have anything. But instead we would we're gonna study and weaponize and attack churches, mosques. And it doesn't work like that. Sometimes a mosque is just a dude in the backyard praying to himself, and that's his mosque, because there isn't a reliable one there, right?
One of the things that was apparent early on in the Afghanistan war, just watching, mainstream news, was there was sort of the early foray into turning into a nation building mission was making sure that the kids got to schools. And everybody who did a report on it on the news would say, yes, we're getting more and more kids into schools. Okay, what kind of school? That's great. They're learning math. Maybe they're learning critical race theory. Maybe they're learning something legitimate, right? And I say that tongue in cheek, but no, they're in these madrasas where they're basically learning to hate America. That they all want to be the next generation. they all want to be the next generation of pilots who don't learn how to land, that sort of thing. It's what what and that was seen as, that was the mainstream view of that in 2003, 2004. And did it ever improve?
No, it was never real, right? So here's the thing is when you see this, again, I'm running, they're stretching. And so the unit goes out, they get a tasking from somewhere. How many kids are in school? And here's how little we know. And this is true to this instant right now.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody knows how many schools are there. And that's the best they can do is go, we don't know. And so all the time.
Well, don't they have an Afghani Department of Education, Pete? Come on.
Sure,
now.
Of course they do, right? And that guy is unreliable. How about that, right? Because we don't.
They should have tens of thousands of employees in their Afghani Department of Education, just like we do.
Yeah. So the Afghans absolutely have a Ministry of Education, and that guy has a job. But we're so bad at partnering with this person that we often dominate what they do. And so what I learned to do was go, hey, captain or major or colonel, whoever it was, let's go out to that school a couple of days later. And they're like, why? I'm like, because I bet there aren't kids there. And if there are, it's a good indication that it's working. And if it's not, wouldn't you want to know? And look, honestly, it was never that hard to convince them. They're like, that's a great idea. Let's go. And so we would show up randomly. Now, I'm not big on showing up randomly, but in these cases, I am. Like, we know where the school is. We've been there. We've seen the pictures. We've seen the dude that teaches them. Let's go see if they're there. And they were never there. Never, ever, ever were they there. Right. And then saying girls went to school and understanding what they were doing are two totally different things. So, okay, we reported a lot of girls at school. How'd you do that? Well, we sent a military unit out there and we counted girls in school. Okay, great. Did they know you were coming? Well, yeah, of course. Okay, great. Okay.
What did these kids do when they weren't in school?
Yeah, I don't know. Good question.
What was the concern?
Right. And they don't have
that they were working on their farm that was just trying to survive in the middle of a war. I mean,
yeah, sure. They're doing whatever kids do on extended summer vacation, right? They do all those things. They throw rocks. They maybe herd sheep, whatever it is. They're doing survival level stuff, and it's going to be different in every valley you're in. The point being is that they weren't in school. No one knew what the curriculum was. No one knew who the teacher was. No one knew there should be daily attendance, right? I mean, that's like one of the first things a teacher's going to do. Who's here today? So I can assess what you guys are doing. Those things, Brad, they don't have those records. So this is what would happen. Every single unit would come and they would say, hey, Pete and your team, how many schools are in this district? And that would be their official request. And I would send my response back up is ask the partner, the American partner, to ask his partner, because I'm not the partner, right? I'm an augmentee. And so that captain would have to go over to the governor and say, how many schools are in the area? And then he'd be like, I don't know. You want me to find out? And then he would maybe help them, maybe he wouldn't. But that's their relationship, right? So we're so bad at this that we have no idea who's in school, what they're being taught, who the teachers are, any of that. We don't have, on a day-to-day, we have no idea. If it's important, wouldn't we want to measure that?
But we never reported. We never reported that back. We had numbers to report back. Obviously, where do those come from? They just make them up?
No, I mean, they go out to the school and then the Afghans or the Iraqis, whoever it is, right? They herd a bunch of kids into school. The word gets out, but it's not in a way that makes any sense in terms of sustainability. It's not a real win. It's a performance. So you have to understand a lot of what happens is a performance. We report to ourselves success, and then we look for the metrics that equal success. We don't look for the affect. We don't. So Rich and I went out and studied education. A lot of kids were learning how to read via a radio literacy program. And usually these things didn't work. And so when they did work, like all these kind of programs, not just radio literacy, but any of these kind of programs that we cooked up. So we're like, has any kid in this valley used a radio to learn any languages? And when dad's like, oh, my kid does that. Like, we will give you a soccer ball if you can bring your kid over here in a couple hours. Whenever you think it's safe to do so, you let us know. We'll come right back out. And this is not very far from the camp. And we would love to talk to him. Is that okay? And they're like, yeah, that'd be great. He'd be so proud. I'm so proud of him. He's learning how to read and write. And so sure enough, this kid comes back and we're like, can we borrow your book for a couple of days? We'll give you like whatever you need here. Take a pic of all this stuff. Matter of fact, take all of it. Right. And so we take the book and we go through the book and we look and like, this kid's really doing lessons. You see him start with bad handwriting and he's learned from the radio. He's learning how to read and write. Not all the kids, but especially this one kid was. And so it kind of was working. And it was an area where we could start to link people to the government and say, hey, your government is trying to help you do this. Come to them for resources. And maybe your kid will learn to read and write. Let's talk about this kid's lesson. Let's put this out there so people can see it. Obviously in a safe way, because you don't want to tie them to the Taliban. But there's ways to deal with that too. By the way, here's one way to deal with that, right? When you're talking about education, whatever it is, you use their stuff against them, right? And so you make the school, you call it the Mullah Omar School. And now it's like sacred because they're not going to do anything that harms the name Mullah Omar, or you let the people name the school. What should the school be named? We love to name the school for them. No. You guys get together. We're going to sit in the back wall. What do you guys want to name this school? How many kids are going to be there every day? What do you guys think is possible here? And work from that starting point instead of just saying there's 350,000 girls in school today, right now, not 2 days, and they're not there. And you
Talk about books. Talk about books, Pete. You put this in the article as well. The ultimate responsibility for delivering books.
Right. And as we were studying education, one of the things we figured out, and this was through a lot of meetings that the Army wasn't able to build, right? They needed a guy like me and Rich there to make this happen because we were able to do things outside of the Army machine. And so I'd built trust, established testable trust. And I said, hey, Governor, here's what we're going to work on next. It would be great if you could help me meet some people who are influential that are, because you guys are all desperate about education. Let's figure this out. And one of the things he said was female education is my number one priority. And then he proceeded to list 5 categories before that were more important, right? But and that doesn't make sense until you hear him explain it. Safety, safety and security 3 times. You have to teach boys how to read and write. And then there was something else, right? But if you didn't have those things met, you couldn't get to girls going to school. It wasn't possible.
Yeah.
So he explained the order to me. Yes, they were his number one priority. It was the thing he wanted to do the most, but he wasn't capable of doing it because he had these limiting factors. Okay. So with that in mind, we're learning about books, education, and everything else. We have all kinds of resources. And we had a guy that I'm going to talk to in a couple hours. His name's Colonel Howe. He's like, help us figure this out. We have all these books. We want to do it right. You guys are good at this. And so what happens is we finally get to this meeting where it's the Ministry of Education, the senior guy for let's call it the state, the province. We have 2 very senior family elders who are able to speak for other family elders. And then particularly in this one region that we were in. And then we had a religious elder there. And we didn't ask this guy to come. We didn't expect him to come. He just showed up. So we know that we got a good Afghan-based thing. And we worked on their schedule. When do you want us? Where do you want us? And if they said at their office, we went to their office. If the Army dropped us off and left, that was great. And we said to them, it's important for us that you guys feel safe and that we don't expose you to any kind of harm. As long as you guys think you can keep us safe, we'll go wherever you want and whatever times and everything else. We completely put our faith in their ability to do this, and they were desperate to get it right. And basically, they came down with the word and they said, it is inappropriate for you guys to ever bring books directly to the schools or to the kids. You should never, ever, ever bring books directly to me at the Ministry of Education. That's dangerous for me. Don't do that. I have trucks. I will come get them at a time when it's safe for me to do it. I will contact you. I'll work with your schedule, but I'm going to come to your camp where I come all the time, and I'm going to grab those books and I will distribute it. And then the family elders are like, that's exactly right. You guys won't do it. He will. We want him to do his job. Here's the family elders holding the government accountable. We want this. We want the government to be able to do something for the people and the people to see value in it, right? And these are elders who are on the executive elder council, for lack of it. They're the senators of this province. And they're saying, this is how you will do this. You're not doing your part, do your part. So now this guy's honor bound and culturally bound to do it. And then the religious elder is just shaking his head the whole time. And we asked him, like, what do you think? And he's like, this is a good thing. This is how it should be done. So you have all these people sign off. We write all this up. Everybody in our state gets the report. They all have access to it, including the State Department. Fast forward 1 year, and a lady named Ann Smedjinghoff and 4 other Americans blown up and killed. And they weren't the only ones harmed. There was another State Department woman that was there. And what were they doing? Well, they were delivering books to school, the kids in school. Now, I don't know why they would ever be doing that in this area. We had solved this problem. We had all agreed we weren't going to do this anymore. And it's not Ann's fault. She's just the name they associate with this attack. There are other Americans. We don't remember their names. But she is dead. The other people are dead because they were going out to deliver books and to have a photo op because they were trying to perform victory. Right.
And if you don't know that's an issue, you could easily get caught up in that because that seems like a good feel good thing to do. I mean, even put the photo op thing aside and just how selfish and stupid that is.
Yeah.
Put that aside. Showing up with books to a school. I mean, you know, maybe some apple pie, maybe some.
Do that in the United States.
You're a hero.
I'm saying show up in as a foreign entity. Have China show up with a bunch of books.
Oh, right. Yeah, that's not a very good look. But I mean, we kind of like that here. You know that that's kind of how we do business. Is you donate something, show up, and not just take credit, but like express your generosity. I mean, that's expected here.
But now put them
Not
in
there.
and make them American. It just doesn't work there, right? Maybe
Right.
it works, maybe it doesn't. I would say it doesn't. I would say parents would be pissed.
Somebody
But-
certainly didn't get the memo.
Yeah, and the thing is, they may have died that day no matter what they were doing, but they shouldn't have been outside the camp doing that. They shouldn't have been
Yeah.
on foot walking around delivering books, because it's wholly inappropriate, and we knew better, right? And so when you start acting like that, because this wasn't the first time they did this after we left, they did continue to do these things. Whatever.
So is that a lack of institutional memory? I mean, is that because you're rotated around that people just forget these important details?
No, there's a guy who was there. His name was Tim Basher. He was there. He was the State Department guy. He'd been there before me. He was there after me. So he absolutely knew about this. Either he didn't have the influence to stop it, but it isn't about that. Like, they sent a dude in from Kandahar to go on this mission as part of this celebration of how they were winning and doing all these great things. And knowing this, when you read Secretary Kerry's eulogy of Vance Medjinghoff, you'll hear the arrogance, and you hear that the words that he says about the terrorists are really the words about us and our need to over influence things, and our disregarding of local customs and local norms and the things that are actually happening on the ground. He can't hear that or see that. So the things he says illustrate his arrogance and ignorance. And again, this is the problem with Secretary Gates, Secretary Kerry, Secretary Clinton. All these people have no idea. And a guy like me can talk all day long, talk for almost an hour right now, right? And they don't care. They'll never listen. They won't believe me. But the reality is that they can't make a win show up. They can't do it. I can go out all day long. You tell me any program, and I'll be like, here's why this doesn't work. Over and over again. Yeah, you're teaching and training these guys. Great. Okay, we had a judge in our province. It's like a state-sized government thing. How come you're not hearing cases? Well, none are brought before me. I don't know how you guys do it in America, but here a judge has cases brought before them. So when they bring me a case, even though I don't have any furniture and I just have a room for a court, I'll hear it. Line up lawyers. But we couldn't do that. And yet we reported that we had this thing. We made this guy out to be a bad guy, aligned with the Taliban. He's from another area, wouldn't show up to work. And he's like, I'll show up to work when there's work to do. By the way, the rule of law guy, an American contractor lawyer, right, who's there to work on rule of law, that guy promised me a gun. I don't feel safe here because none of these people are my people. So I stay here as long as I can. And then my partner rotates out and he stays here as long as he can. We hate it here. I don't feel safe here. These aren't my people. And so then Rich and I go to the chief of police, the P cop, and he's got people lined up outside his door. And so we talk to these guys. What are you here for? My kid, it's on all the same stories, like with dads. My kid did this dumb thing. My kid killed this person. My kid got in a fight. My kid stabbed somebody. My kid. How come you're not going to court? Are you kidding me? No. We go to the P cop. He takes care of this. So you have the police chief handling things in a tribal fashion. That is their rule of law. He was the guy. So it was working. It just didn't work as we designed it. And so instead of realizing that, we just continue to brief that this judge was a piece of crap. But the reality is that we did not have the capacity to build an active court system. Same thing was true in Iraq. How come you guys aren't going to court? We don't know what's going to happen there. It's too just. We may not get what we want. We know what we'll get out of the civil court here in Iraq, privately in the tribes. We know what we'll get. We can handle that. We don't like it either. We hate that we're in the situation. But if we go there and we lose, can't handle that. And so they rejected the courts outright.
Let's end this thing on, could be a downer, could be an upper.
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm going to get your thoughts on it, because we haven't talked about this. Let's say that we actually manage to leave Afghanistan this month, like we had planned to do.
Yeah.
And that means leaving no advisors behind, leaving no troops behind, leaving no assets behind. We just cut and we leave like we're supposed to do. What happens then? Okay,
it's already happening, and we're terrible at this. I wrote a paper, and it's up here. The link is up on the screen. It's called Transition Up. It's a conversation with 29 articles, and I've got two other co-authors on this thing. One of them is Rich. We are sucky partners, and routinely, remember, I've been there when we've closed areas down. Everybody knows we're leaving, but we don't know the date, and so we're such good partners that we just poof disappeared. It happened just the other day. We left Bagram Airfield, poof, disappeared. Didn't tell the person there. So one of the things that I would do whenever we were going to leave is I would go to the partner. I would say, "What do you need, man?" Because and I don't know what date is going to be, but one of these days in the very near future, and I'm talking weeks, not months, we're leaving and never coming back. What do you need? And you'd see a look of terror on their face. They're like, "What are you talking about? You're leaving?" I'm like, "We're leaving. What?
Because even though you're providing, a whole bunch of weird instability, there is a stability with your presence that, it's obviously when it goes away, it's going to go away.
One of the most powerful things I learned, and again, it's kind of a pun, but I don't mean it to be. The guy's like, electricity. I need that generator right over there. Not the multi-million-dollar truck trailer generator, the simple one. Another one of those Chevy 350 motors that was a generator. It's like, I need that and some fuel. And I'm like, that should be easy to do. I don't know. I'll ask. It's not up to me. But if that's what you need, what else do you need? And I would make this list. And then the guy said to me, how long would your government run without any electricity? And I'm like, 8 minutes tops. And it would start to crumble if we had no electricity. And I don't mean like the electricity's out. I mean, no electricity.
Right. No chance of bringing it back. It'd be Lord of the Flies in 8 minutes for sure.
Yeah. Right. And so this is the point. It's like we just go poof and disappear and, expect there to be some kind of transition. We talk about, we can't abandon our allies. Well, we just did in Bagram.
Yeah.
Right? We didn't tell these guys we were leaving. We didn't build a bridge. We've known we were going to leave in July for a long time. We've been planning to leave, but we didn't plan to transition that power completely to that person. And if they want something and it's there, for God's sakes, just give it to them. Well, they'll sell it and they'll make money and leave to them. Who cares?
You'll leave them with a nice impression, a nice thought.
Yeah, right. Yeah. You're not going to control what happens the moment you're leaving, right? So don't take the thing that again, who can lead without any kind of electricity, without any kind of water, without any kind of suit? Yeah, all these things. Why are we talking about potable water 20 plus years later? We should be able to deal with these things. And if you bring potable water, Brad, it's a circuit, it's a system. You have to get rid of the non-potable water, right? We never talk about that. And so now you're bringing cholera and disease and all kinds of waterborne things. So this is the reason why we can't stay, is because people like Secretary Gates don't understand. It's not about NGOs. They're just as bad at this as we are. They come in with the preconceived notions. They try to solve problems without understanding. Look, you can't presume to improve the condition of something without taking the time to be bothered to understand the condition of it. You just come in and say you need.
And if that understanding doesn't match your previous understanding, adapting your understanding to match what's on the ground. You have to do that. You can't just go to understand and then just ignore what you understand.
Right. So if we're going to stay in these circumstances, and if we're going to go to other places, look, it didn't work in Afghanistan, and it's going to be horrible. And we have to own the human atrocity that we just created. That's going to happen. And I'm not saying that we shouldn't have gone. I'm not saying that it wasn't possible. What I'm saying is we refused as institutions to improve to the point where there was a reliable path. And there was a bigger plan there. President Bush writes this out in decision points. There was an overall plan that was going to happen. It sounded great. Again, this is the part where it breaks down. You've got this great plan. Academics have talked about it. This is how you do it. And we didn't do it. You got to
implement it. Yeah.
Right. So that's the point. And I appreciate you talking to me about it. I'm glad to answer more questions. But
Pete, this has been an amazing hour, and I'm just glad to been able to set some volleys and let you go, because people need to see your passion for this. This applies to obviously it applies to our foreign policy, and where we send our sons and daughters to die or to be injured or to fight hard or whatever. But it's also pretty applicable across a lot of endeavors. Just knowing the facts on the ground, kind of important, kind of a thing. Thank you, Pete.
Yeah, no worries. I appreciate it, and I appreciate you.
Do the end roll.
I will, and I appreciate you for suggesting this, because I hadn't thought about just talking about it. You're right. Like, I can self-publish on Medium where the article is, and now we have this show, and so the New York Times doesn't have to report it. Neither does anybody else. I've reported it myself, and you made it possible. So thank you so much. Here we go. Roll the roll.
Good job, man.